Alrighty, per the request for doing a little bit of physical sun and sky to illuminate this room, this is just going to be a really quick tutorial on how to do the physical sun and sky and how to get it set up so we can get some nice lighting to fill this up. Because if I use mental ray right now, essentially what's going to happen, let's go to our hypershade render perspective. Go select mental ray. And we can see that's not that exciting. That's pretty blank. I mean, granted, mental ray is giving us a reflection on the surface of the ground here, but not very much else. So we're going to keep that image just so we have a nice comparison. We're going to do a few other things. We're going to bookmark it so that I can always bring the camera right back to this shot. But right before I do that, some of the areas that you'll be rendering, it's hard to get the camera to see everything. You might wind up, when you hit render, that it turns into a white shape, and that basically means you're outside of a wall because you're not far enough back to see everything. So we're going to adjust the camera and change its angle view to something more like in a video game with a 90-degree angle view. And you notice this gets a whole lot more in my screen. I can go in there, but I can actually see a lot more now. What this will also make is that it'll be a lot easier for me to get in nice and close to see certain areas too. So, okay, so we'll keep that image. I might come in a little bit closer, we'll see. I've adjusted that, and now I want to do my physical sun and sky. And the physical sun and sky, remember, and per that the Word document I gave you as a tutorial, is essentially it's a fake sky and ground plane that turns on a whole bunch of things inside a mental ray, like actually putting a fake sun, creates directional light that's tied to it, and it allows us to create bounce lighting by default through what's called final gather. And you can get as elaborate as you want, but we're just going to use final gather because it renders fast and it still looks pretty good without too much computation. So to do my physical sun and sky, I have to do a few different things. So for one, we have to add the physical sun and sky into here. And I'm going to do that by going into my render settings. Make sure you're on mental ray. And we go to scene. And where it says physical sun and sky, click create. Notice a few things like kind of popped up. And one of the things, we'll minimize this, or actually we'll close it up for now. We'll get back into here, but a little bit later. And if I go into my hypershade, you'll notice these are all the things that are in my scene. And one of them, if I go to utilities, it created these two nodes which control the physical sun and sky. Now without me changing anything, okay, and I just make sure that this is bookmarked. Right there, little bookmark. And I hit render, and I want to see what the before and after kind of look like. Come on. Will take a little bit longer, but we should start to notice a difference. Now there's something I have to add to this, or I'm going to add to this rather, to make this work better. But we should already see a difference here. And what we can see is if we look through, because remember we have a glass material for a skylight and for these large windows that are here. And what I can see is this is before and this is after. And we can notice that there's a pretty big difference. It's still awfully dark, so we want to brighten that up. And I think I'm going to do a few things. So for one, what I want to do is I want to brighten this up. I want to get it warmer in here. Um, so before I go in and I start tweaking out any of these, like, crazy things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select my camera. And I'm still in my Utilities tab. You can see it made two special utilities for the physical sun and sky that's making these elements. One is the physical sky, and one is actually the physical sun. It made two nodes, one for each, and they're tied together. But I want to make a third node, and I have to go through my camera to do that. So I click on this, and in my attribute editor under perspective shape, it's I have to put it inside of here. So I'm going to scroll down inside the properties of my camera in the attribute editor, go to mental ray. There's my physical sky in the environment shader, but where it says lens shader, I'm going to click on this little box here. And that allows me, anytime you see that little box, it means it's an input where I can put something in that's going to control something. That could be textures, utilities, all sorts of things. For this particular one, I want to put a node or utility in this called exposure. There's a few kinds, but I'm just going to go right into my little create render node box and start typing EXPO. And this narrows it down to the mental ray exposure nodes. We're just going to do something that's really nice and simple. Click on the simple one. How easy is that? Now, once again, have not done anything but just drop that in. This was just mental ray with no physical sun and sky. Mental ray with physical sun and sky. Keep this image. And we're going to do it with physical sun and sky. Now, this third one, physical sun and sky with the exposure. And you might notice it's taking a little bit longer, but you're also going to notice immediately there's some things that are different going on. And look at that. It's not finished yet, but we can already see that there's a lot more going on. Our little characters aren't in like a Doom video game environment. It's not perfect by any means, but man, talk about a big difference. We started with this, which is flat and no depth to it. Then we went to this, has a lot of depth, but it's just too freaking dark. And then this one, we're somewhere in the middle, but we're getting a whole lot more bounce light and illuminating this area. Now we have to refine this and change it. So I'm going to keep that image. That just means it's holding it here, so I can actually, this is really awesome to be able to view and look through the different variations to see what changes I've done. And the first thing, before I start messing with these, I'm going to go to my lights, of which there should be just one, my sun shape. And it's a directional light, and I'm going to scale that up so that I can see it. And it's an everywhere light that's going in one direction that can cast shadows. You use this for things like the sun, the moon, a far away distant light that's very impressive, that's lighting everything. It doesn't matter where I move this. It doesn't matter how I scale it. It depends. It really matters where it's pointing. So I want to rotate this. Let me get over here so that it's coming inside and maybe coming in from an angle like so. Now, if I balance this out, this is basically saying, hey, the sun is shining in this direction and it's coming. If I were to look up in the sky, I would see it there. This is closer. This would be like noon, 12 o'clock high. This is more like a sunset. It's going down. This is just going to be, somewhere, depending on the time of day, where the sun is either going up or down, but it's not at high noon and it's not at, dusk either. So it's right about there. And I'm going to go back into my bookmark. And let's see what that does. Now you'll notice that this starts to take longer and longer to render. We're going to go in, we're just going to make a few quick tweaks. I don't want this to take forever. You could spend a long time like fine tuning and doing stuff. But now we have the light more directed. We can see it coming through and shining nicely on the stairs and on the ground and coming through the windows. And it's giving us a nice bounce light inside of here. So it went from this to this, where we can clearly see the light coming through and the angle that it's coming in. That looks nice. Okay. Boom. So I'm going to do a few things. One, that glass material is adding a little bit too much blue, so I'm going to go back into my materials, choose that glass material that's on the glass surfaces, and I'm going to take the color out of them so that they're not quite as cool. Basically, I'm just desaturating them. Now I'm going to go in and I want to do some color changes and affect some things. But that's basically just setting up your physical sun and sky. We've got the exposure node inside of the light. I have it, if I look in the utilities, I now have 3 nodes. An exposure, which I can adjust, a physical sky, and a physical sun. I don't affect this one because it's being controlled by really its brightness, and everything is going to be controlled and modified by these two to get the effect that I want. So this is there, but it's being driven by other things. So let's put a pause on this one, and then we'll continue with the settings. This is the setup of the physical sun and sky, and the next one will be adjusting the settings.